Hey, hi, I'm Nick, and it's week 9 of me traveling around the world. In this Around the World series, I'm trying to go around the world and try this digital nomad lifestyle that we'll talk about. So subscribe to the channel. In the previous episode, we left Venice to go to Vienna by train. So here's my very informed opinion about Austria as a country and Vienna as a city, based on like 8 hours of being there and reading one book. Enjoy. What do you actually remember about Austria, like right off the bat? You probably remember Mozart, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the fact it got Alps. That's probably about it. So in historic terms, Austria is like a kid who peaked in high school, probably. Not like in kindergarten like most of the countries did, but in high school. They got passed and not that much in present. Oh, that's a very harsh description of a country that gives us Freud. You definitely want to suck your mom or something. Well, let me give you some historic context in like under 2 minutes, alright? I never checked these dates. The entire Europe is just farmland, and a whole bunch of kingdoms fucking each other up after the Roman Empire went tits up. Austria is very smart about wars, in fact so smart that it's one of the biggest forces in Europe, because it's got a hell of farmland and peoples. The Habsburgs get thrown and the golden era of Austria starts. Austria will remain pretty much unchanged politically and culturally for the next 600 years or so. Let's fast forward a bit. Now it's 1812 and it's the middle of industrial revolution in Europe. England and Spain are balls deep in the Atlantic trade. Well, if you can call trade stealing a whole bunch of gold from one country and then taking it to your country. That's trade. Austria is still rather big, because it's got the most farmland. But if you look at the technology used for farming in Austria, you'll see that nothing has changed over the last 600 years. The production levels are pretty much unchanged. Any innovation is prohibited by the king. It's easier to rule over people who are dumb than over people who are smart. Oh wow, that's great. Because when people get smart, they want like freedoms and monies and don't want to live in dirt houses anymore. Well, and actually it's really hard to blame Habsburgs themselves, because you cannot even comprehend the scale to which they inbred it. And I know that's a very wrong thing to say, right? The entire thinking was like, my dad, who was a king, was doing this and it turned out fine, so why should I change anything? Because my dad is a smart man. Well, if your dad was doing his sister, you probably shouldn't do your sister, right? Because it's just shameful at this point. Yeah, this logic never transferred to the Habsburgs, so they just kept rolling with it. And if you skip another 100 years, you'll see Austria lost most of its territory, like any other European country pretty much. The only thing left was to sit around and wait for the baby to be born, which will start the biggest war in the history of humankind. And of course join the wrong side of it. It's the dumbest shit. After the war, Austria was split into like 4 halves between the allies, and they left it under the premise that Austria will remain neutral. And back to Vienna, because that's our topic for today. And before booking any tickets to Vienna, just ask yourself, like, how many times have I honestly been to the theater or a Broadway show or anything like that in the last year? And if the number is less than fucking 3, just don't go. Because you wouldn't care. You wouldn't care, you're better off going anywhere else. That's because Vienna is famous for art, theater, and music, and all the other white people like Hall culture shit you can imagine. But pretty much the entire idea for this video is to explain like why. Because nothing was changing in Austria, like politically, it wasn't like the industrial center, it was just a place for everyone to hang out. What were the conditions for that to happen, right? And the answer would be surprisingly easy. It's money. Like with anything else in the world, it's money. For 600 years, everything in the entire country of Austria, and when it was bigger, it was like this entire empire, belonged to the king. The only way to get wealthy in a country like this is to impress the king. I'm simplifying this so much, like all the history teachers are in pain and in tears at this point. It all revolves around the king, and pretty much everyone who pleases the king gets shit, and everyone who doesn't please the king doesn't get shit, or gets wrecked and fucked in the ass. So you're building a house, you're keeping up with the Joneses. You cannot just build a bigger house, because the house cannot be bigger than the king's house. But you can use a cheat code and like invite a famous architect or something. And that's where things start to get interesting. So you're inviting a famous architect and pay him to do the house. and then your neighbor gets a garden and gets some statues there from like a famous statue for the maker. I don't know how those people are called. And basically the king is playing the same game. So if there are no wars and you're entertaining like your entire suite of people who are surrounding you, most of the time you get bored at some point. So you gotta entertain yourself, right? And entertain yourself in the most like fashionable manner possible. So you go to the theaters and you sponsor the plays, because you cannot watch the same play 7 times in a row and be pleased still, because it's not cool. You gotta make new plays, and you gotta make like new songs and orchestras and whatever the fuck, and pose for the picture for 17 hours a day on a horse. You're a king, why not? At this point you're a king, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of money, you're sometimes bored, your suite is trying to keep up with the Johnsons. Basically you need a lot of talent for all of this shit. It's like Netflix, but with a king who will order just movies and then play it for himself and play it for his people and like it very much. And a lot of talent in Europe is broke. It's fucking broke, man. So basically if you're a talented guy or girl, or they, them, I don't give a fuck, being born in Austria, you have a high chance of doing your artist shit as a form to make a living, because there are people searching for the talent. There is a king who will fund you, and there are people around the king who will fund you because they're bored and they need stuff to watch and to listen to. Every fucking dinner there will be like some kind of boys band playing, right? Just one fucking direction right there. All the people living around Austria will go to Austria basically in search for work and in search for funding. The same way it works in the US with startups. All the like interesting dudes would go there, and the quantity of composers and artists and all that would skyrocket in Vienna, attracting like aristocrats to see the plays and to hear the music, right? And to fund more of them through like tickets and donations and whatever. You get a city that was booming and built by like the most famous and smart people of that time. You get like wide streets, none of this medieval, like, you know, it looks like Washington DC if you've ever been there. It's political, it's strict, but it's from 1800s, 1700s, right? With big fucking columns and all of that kind of thing. Basically the entire idea of Vienna is to impress every fucking person who comes in there, right? With the wide fucking streets, with the tall fucking building, with the biggest fucking churches, just to say, alright, see how much money we've got, see how rich you can get in this fucking country, right? But the rest of the country, for a long ass time, was just farmland with a lot of unhappy fucking people. That's it. To summarize all of this up, you get this like pretty shell that has nothing in it and hasn't had anything in it for the last like 100 years or so. Basically Vienna and Austria is like a prime example of how abuse of power by monarch for 600 years straight can make a cultural boom and make this great shell and build great cities, but stop any kind of innovation for years. It's like, you know, if you like Paris, it's the same shit, you'll like it here. That's just a little historical background of Vienna and Austria in general. Just remember, it's my fucking very informed opinion. I've been there for 8 hours, I couldn't care less. If Vienna gets like a 4, subscribe and I'll see you in the next video, because we are moving to another country yet again. I'm on a train. We're going from Vienna, we're going somewhere else. Where we're going, comment down below.